right, everybody, welcome. Today, you are in for a treat. We are meeting with Collin Clem. He is the founder of Breakthrough Blushing, and we're going to hear a little bit more about his blushing story, his rise out of erythrophobia, and some of the work that he's doing now. So, Collin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, April.
I'm so glad you're here. So, let's just jump right into it. Let's talk a little bit about going into your background of your blushing story. Like, where did it start? When did you notice it? And all of the details around that, because a lot of times we want to know, like, how did this start for you?
Yeah. So I don't have a definitive moment when I first remember it starting. It was honestly as early on in school as I can remember. It was always anytime the attention turned to me, my face would just turn completely red. It could be in class, it could be at the lunch table, it could be in a one-on-one conversation, it could be with teachers, it could be with friends, it could be after school at events. It didn't matter. It was like anywhere, anytime. And I remember when I had to share my essay aloud, I had to read it aloud. I would be in front of the class and my face would start turning beet red, and I would be like putting my face straight down, hoping nobody noticed. Looking back, I'm making it incredibly obvious that I am very uncomfortable and I'm drawing more attention to myself. But that's how I coped, and I did that for quite a while. It wasn't so from ages maybe 6 or 7 to about age 16 or so is the times that I really started dealing with or really dealt with this. And, during that time, I did all the research that everybody does. I looked at the different distractions I could use, the different creams, makeups, medications, therapy, surgery. I looked into everything. But what was interesting is I was actually more embarrassed to ask somebody for help or ask my parents for help with this than just to try to figure it out on my own. And so I never actually pursued any of those. I never tried makeup. I never tried creams, medication, anything, because I was too afraid to ask my parents to help me with this. And so one of the things that was mentioned was confrontation, like accepting it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't even know how to do that, right? And so I just kind of kept plugging along, and I didn't seem to get any better, and it was getting in the way of my school life. I mean, I would know the answer to things and I just wouldn't raise my hand um because I was just too afraid to turn red. And so it all kind of came to a breaking point for me. So I was always an amazing student growing up. Like, my mom's a teacher. Grades were incredibly important to me and my family. And it was something that I took very seriously. Like, being an academic, I guess you could say, or whatever, was important to me. And it was a huge part of who I was. Everybody knew me as the kid that got perfect scores and everything. And the reason that's important is because I was on track to finish number one in my graduating class. I was going to be valedictorian. And it was like, if I just kept doing what I was doing, that would be me. And the problem with that is that I would have to speak at graduation, and that was in front of over 1,500 people. And that was quite literally the scariest thing that I could possibly think of. Like, I just could not think of anything scarier. And it was in my path. Like, it was going to happen if I just kept doing what I was doing. And I remember having this idea of derailing my entire plan of tanking my grades on purpose, just getting a B or getting a C and ruining everything that I had worked so hard for just to avoid giving that speech, just because I was too afraid to go in front of people for 5 minutes and turn red. And I was like, I just remember that being this breaking point of like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Am I seriously about to let this fear of what other people think of me, which is all it comes down to, am I seriously about to let that define the rest of my life? I'm going to let it stop me from achieving the thing that mattered more than anything else, which means then I won't get the scholarships to schools, so then I won't go to as good of a college, and then I won't get as good of a job. And it's like, where does this stop? You know? Um, and so I decided to start confronting it. And when I did, I just started speaking up more, to start facing this fear and building pride and building confidence in myself and my ability to blush in front of people and not let it bother me as much. And as I did that, I was able to build a tremendous source of confidence. I became much more comfortable speaking in front of people. And as that happened, the blushing happened less and less. And then by the time graduation came, I was able to give that speech in front of everybody as valedictorian. And I made the entire topic of the speech about my experience with blushing, actually, which was really interesting. I talked about overcoming fear and taking steps into outside of your comfort zone. So it's been incredible. It was honestly looking back, and I tell people this, it was the probably the best thing that ever happened to me was dealing with this because I would have never learned how to build confidence in myself and stop worrying about what other people think if it didn't get so painful. And I think there's a lot of people who will go through their entire life worried about the judgment from other people, but it's never painful enough to do something about it. And for me, it was. And so for you, for anybody that's listening, like you're at a point where it's painful enough, and that is when you can truly start to, build confidence in yourself and learn to care less.
I'm listening to you, and the fact that you were able to do that in high school leading up to your graduation, where I didn't deal with this in high school. I actually sang at my graduation. I was not a valedictorian, but I did I did sing at my graduation. And it was like I did that a lot in high school. I worked with a record label. I was constantly like singing, putting myself on stages, like loved it. So it was really shocking for me as the years went on that it wasn't until like I was in 20 like 17-ish that this started happening to me. I graduated in 2003. So it was a big difference between like it's so difficult for young people and it's also very difficult for adults. For me was more of like who am I becoming? I'm spiraling into this like version of myself that I don't even recognize, making myself smaller. So many people struggle with not so for you it was painful and you were like I'm not about to derail all of my plans for this, like I'm just going to start showing up and I'm going to start talking. For a lot of people who interact with Blushing Phoenix, and for my own experience too, some of the hardest part was that in between, which is the I know where I want to be, but this discomfort is so heavy in between. And as soon as people feel the redness or somebody says something, they immediately start to go back into like that shame cycle and that fear of judgment. How did you get through that gap? How did you bridge the gap of feeling so uncomfortable?
There really is no magic pill for this. This I always come back to the quote from Tony Robbins. He says that change happens when the pain of change becomes less than the pain of staying the same. And that is entirely true. And I think you start to become aware of what's happening. You know what you want to do. And truthfully, you just have to keep letting it bite you and be painful. And you go through experience after experience. And eventually it just clicks. Like this is the same. This has been my experience with the gym. Wanted to go to the gym for 4 years, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it." I would start doing it, and then I'd start to like, I'd wake up one morning, I'm tired. I'm like, never mind, and then I'd fall right back, and it happened over and over and over. And then about a year and a half ago, or for many people, I went through a bit of a breakup, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to use this. This is my opportunity to, actually start focusing on myself. And then now it's been a year and a half, and I go to the gym every morning. So it's like you just have to hit these points in life where you just kind of, not hit a rock bottom, but you just hit a point where it's just painful enough where you actually are like, I'm going to do this. And then it's important to also set expectations for yourself. Like expect to blush. You are going in with the mentality. I think it all comes down to actions plus mindset. So you have to you can't just take the action and keep the old mindset. You have to say, I'm going to blush. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not doing this for them to try to impress them or whatever. I'm doing this because I know I have more in me that is not being tapped into. And I need to start getting more comfortable. Because what I do with my life doesn't affect them, but it affects me. So I need to start being the person that I want to be. And if they want to judge me for it, they're not the person that I want in my life anyway. So like you have to have these kind of mindsets as you go into these situations, and it really, really helps through that discomfort. And then you start building a little bit of confidence, and then soon enough you are through this.
I think that this is so powerful what you're sharing. And a lot of it is what I talk about on Blushing Phoenix is transformative action. And so much of that, to your point, is mindset. Because I get people who, you probably see this with your business as well, that people will message me and they really want to harp on how awful it is. And they will continuously reinforce just how awful it is, or people leave me comments and say, "Oh, lucky you," or I've had men say, "Oh, women are lucky because we actually think that's cute," and or it's like, what? Like, we don't think it's cute. And I was I was working with a client the other day, and one of the things we were talking about is, if it wasn't this insecurity, what else would it be? Because we know so many people who don't blush and they still struggle. And it still goes back to what I think you're saying, is that mindset and action in all things. And blushing becomes this villainized thing in our lives, that if I wasn't blushing, then I would have XYZ. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like saying, if I had that job, I would have XYZ, and then you get that job. Or for many people during the pandemic who used to work in offices, who would say, if only I could work from home, I would get my body in shape and I would meal prep my foods. And then most of the people I know had the opportunity and never did that thing, because the the mindset and the action weren't aligned. um and I love what you said about the gym and the results. And this kind of takes me back to something I thought about recently with when I first started doing weight training. I didn't have a result just because I picked up the weights. I knew that down the line, if I keep this consistent action over time, that I will get a result. And so when it comes to like building muscle or losing weight, or optimizing our health in that way, we know that result is coming. But with blushing, it's so painful and it's so irritating and it's so hooked into the shame cycle that people just give up because they showed up and they blushed and they're like, I'm not doing it again. When you were younger and you kind of had that, what I call the Phoenix moment, which is like, this is crazy, I'm not shying away because of this thing, and you started getting into that mindset shift and that action, did you have people like make fun of you, call that out, and how did that impact you when they would do that, if that happened?
No, I don't think so. Um, and perhaps people did, but it's about the mindset. Like, things don't bother you unless you let them bother you. And so, like, I don't remember, truthfully. Like, there might have been people who did, but I remember, like, I just had this insane mindset shift where I was like, I need to do this. Like, this is a non-negotiable. Like, I have to start speaking up to get more comfortable with this. If people want to say something, let them say something. And it's like, I don't know what snapped in me, right? But something did, and I I know that after that, like, anytime somebody tried making a comment, I'd be like, yeah, this is just how I am. I just blush easily, like, and if they tr like, I just wouldn't let it bother me. Like, I refused, and sure, there'd be moments where somebody would point it out. I'd be with friends, and I will tell people, like, most of the time, people aren't trying to be malicious. Like, you are often making it the worst, like, of the situation. You're like, oh, they're judging me. It's like, no, they're literally just observing. And especially when you start acting weird about it too, and you start acting uncomfortable, they genuinely think like something's like wrong with you. So like, if you just act normal though, and you just start blushing, like me right now, you can see I'm definitely red, I'm somewhat red. And so it's like, you wouldn't think something's wrong with me though, because I'm speaking with conviction. I use strong body language. I'm acting comfortable. And so you think I'm comfortable, and you think this is just the way I am and that I'm passionate about this. So it's like, we often prescribe meaning to it, and this is going so far off of the question that you asked, but we often prescribe like meaning to it. And something that I just want to say is, like, this is only a problem because you started telling yourself a story about the blushing. And like, you, the problem in your head is that if I blush, I look XYZ. Like, you think that the blushing conveys a message to other people by itself, but that is not true. And that is what you need to start proving to yourself wrong, is it's about your actions more than anything. Like, it really is. Because right now I am blushing, and you could see it as passion, or you might not even notice it if I don't say anything. But it's just how I am. It's just my natural stress response. When I get passionate, when I start spiking my adrenaline, this is what happens. And there's nothing that I can do about it, and it will be that way for the rest of my life. But just the act of blushing happening doesn't tell people you're weak. It doesn't tell people that you like them. It's like maybe you giggling and flirting, is makes it seem like you like them, or being too nice, or being whatever it is. But it's like if you are stern, or if you're confident and you're strong, it's like nobody's going to think you're weak, you like them, or that you're unconfident, or all these things that you think blushing says about you. And so that's a total side tangent. But in those moments where, people might say something, it's about just remaining strong and like remaining acting like it doesn't bother you. And then as you practice that, it genuinely stops bothering you, even if people do say it.
I was in a meeting the other day, actually yesterday at work, and so I moved from my hometown. I'm originally from Oklahoma, but I lived in
Oh,
Tennessee my whole life. And then I moved to South Carolina a year ago, and this is where my company is located. And being at the table has always been a thing for me because my flushing and blushing experience started in the workplace with an authoritative person when I was trying to climb the ladder. And immediately, to your point, he called it out. He was also a jerk, but he called it out. And I projected my thoughts on him, which is that he's going to see me as weak. How could I ever continue to grow in this position? And I didn't know that at the time that I was the one creating that belief and like pushing that belief over to him. He was just like making fun because he was a jerk. That's what he did. And he would try to get me to do that every single time. And it worked because I had fear of him and the control that I believed he had over my ability to grow in my role. And so when it first started happening for me, and then from that point, I did grow in my position. I did continue. I mean, I left that company, but I did grow in my position, and I was able to be in all the rooms and sit with CEOs and founders and such. So sitting at the table has always been a big thing for me, and especially using my voice at the table. Normally, where I'm going to start to flush and blush. In this new company, I've been here almost 3 years. Such a safe environment, like just where people are not calling things out. People just corporate can be very toxic. I mean, any sort of like institutionalized things can be very toxic. This place is not toxic. And it's taken almost 3 years for my nervous system to regulate. And while I was doing the work through my own healing process. Anyway, all that to say, yesterday I was in a meeting and we were about 15 minutes into the meeting. And it's almost like an out of body experience where I realized within myself that I was like, I'm not hyperfixated on myself at all right now. Like I'm so safe here through the work that I've been doing and through the mindset shift that I've had over the years and the environment with really awesome people that's also tied to my livelihood it was 15 minutes in that I realized where you almost have that moment where you're like, I'm not flushing at all. You almost like are going to make yourself flush because you're like, but I did not one time. And actually, I think whenever I'm in a place like that, I think maybe at one point I flushed on the side of my neck. I felt it, but I can't confirm that it actually happened. And I didn't care if it did or didn't because it's just exactly what you were saying that it's been a long journey, but it was also knowing that I have something to say in this room. I belong in this room and I know what I'm talking about and I'm good at what I do. And so it's more of like environment played a big role for my healing as far as like just becoming okay with myself. But really, Colin, and I'd be so interested in hearing your feedback on this. Blushing is a symptom to something else. And when we get to the bottom of what is triggering that and why are we hyperfixating on that? And why do we care so much what other people think? And then which reinforces that blush. For me, it all came down to self-worth, which sounded crazy at first because I was like, of course I'm confident and I feel good and I like to be like vocal and in front of people. But what it really came down to is many years of struggling with people pleasing, um, fear of judgment, which all kind of like rabbles down to self-worth. Like, why am I not enough in this moment? And why do other people get to determine if I am actually worthy of being here? Like, it was a crazy, like, eye-opening moment for me about a year ago that really launched my growth. And the flushing and blushing rarely ever happens once I really became secure in who I am. And it sounds like for you, even in your younger years, you just had this almost like an anchor to your self-worth. Like, what would you say to that?
So, self-worth is not a term that I often use, and because I don't really understand it, and I've never taken the time to really understand it. And so I don't like speaking about things that I don't really truly understand. But I mean, I definitely I just see it as a confidence issue. And in terms of like if you have nothing to prove, like if you are looking at all the things you don't have, that's when you feel like, you have low confidence. But if you look on the proof that you do have, you're like, okay, I've done this, then you can start building a little bit of confidence. Um, but about like the self-worth and the fear of judgment, I mean, like you will always be afraid of judgment. It's like it's programmed into us. Like we're social beings and we don't like being isolated. We associate isolation with death. It's just programmed into our nature. And so you are always trying to be liked by the group. But what's interesting is that we then, the problem I see with most people, and I used to have as well, is we change our identity to fit in with whatever group we're a part of. And so it's because we want to be perceived by this group in this way in order to gain their acceptance. But we never question why we need their acceptance. And so it's always nice having someone that you really look up to, that you can live in alignment with and be respected by, no matter what situation you're in. Like if you always pass every decision through what would this person do, and then you do that thing, you know that they'll be proud of you. And so if it's somebody is that you respect, then that makes a lot of it easier. It's like if this person doesn't accept me, that's okay because I'm doing this because I know this person will. And you always need that thing. Like for me, it's a lot of people I look up to on online. Growing up, it was a lot of my family, it was my parents. That I would like be like, they always taught me this. They'd be proud of me for sticking strong here when I'm with my friends and they're, trying to get me to do something or whatever, something stupid. I'm like, no, guys, that's not cool. And like, I'm okay with losing a little bit of respect with them because I know the values that were instilled with me by my parents, and I would rather make them proud in this moment than impress these people doing this thing that I don't think is cool. And so point is I think you have to get clear on who you want acceptance from and who you are trying to gain respect from. Don't let it just be whoever is next to you in the moment. Act in alignment with the person that you want to be. And then if that person that's next to you doesn't accept that, they are weeding themselves out of your life. And that is good. And that is not a problem. There are 8 billion people on the planet, and you will find people who want to like you for you and not some image that you're trying to uphold to impress other people. And so like in those meetings and whatnot for like where you said you would get the feeling that you're weak, or like that's totally normal. And I have a client who also went through that same thing. And what I would say is like fall back on your intentions, fall back on I'm here because I want to do a good job. Um, I'm blushing, or I feel this way because I want to be seen as, I want to be seen as competent and like I'm good at my job. But you don't need to be somebody that you're not. You're like, I will show that through effort. And I will do the best that I can. And you set that expectation with them going in. It's like, hey, maybe I'm not the best at this area, but I will give it my absolute all. And you tell me if it meets your standards, and if it doesn't, let me know where I can improve. And then I will try to do better in that area. And so like if you just be more vulnerable, if you just be more authentic to who you are and you stop putting on a front to please your boss, to please your friends that you're with, or some stranger that is acting in a way that you don't like, if you stop putting on these fronts, you start to get more comfortable with that little bit of discomfort, but you gain a huge sense of comfort with who you are, and your, I guess, self-worth.
I think that is so spot on. And I appreciate and admire the fact that you were like, I don't know a lot about like the whole self-worth thing. And so I don't want to really speak on that. And also, it just made me think when you said it that self-worth is also a buzzword, which is why when I first thought about like it's a self-worth issue, I was like, no, like I dismissed it immediately because in the buzzword world, in social media world, it was like I identify a certain person with that and I'm not that person. But the more I looked into it, it really was about knowing who you are and your identity, and also knowing that you're a human and you have ups and downs, and all of that is okay. And especially for women who also have hormonal things that happen, like it's totally okay, like to just be a human. And to your point of um kind of changing who you are depending on who you're with, when I was younger and I was like growing in the corporate ladder situation, my functional neurologist in Tennessee, I was telling, as I started flushing, and I would come see him and I would tell him like, what is this? He was the first person I really talked to about it. And he's like, it's fine. You're a human. That's what humans do. And I'm like, no, I wasn't always doing this. And it's like when I get really passionate or when I get really amped up or if I get really nervous, like if it's too hot outside, like my body is constantly doing this. And he's like, it's fine, like trying to get me to not hyper fixate on it. But like when your brain's stuck in that loop, it's not, when somebody says, well, it's fine, just move on from it. I get what he was doing, but it wasn't helpful. And we had a great relationship. So he said to me one time, he said, when do you do that more? Like, when does that happen the most? Does that happen when you're like at home with your family? I was like, no, very rarely. And he said, when does it happen the most? And I said, it happens at work all day long. And he said, we kind of got into this discussion about living a double life, like who April is at work, because that's who I thought you have to be. And this is what's got me this far versus who April is at home, which are not totally different people. It's just more of like I would tame my voice a lot in the workplace because the behaviors in the workplace showed that when I talk, I get in trouble. Or I get fired. I've been fired so many times, it's crazy. And so, and so that was kind of like wired into me as a behavior pattern of like, oh, don't do this. So constantly aware and trying to save myself and trying to create an outcome that really was out of my control at the end of the day. So even if I did like falsify who I was in that space or hold back on who I was and kind of put this front on, it still didn't save me. It gave me maybe a little bit of longevity and then I was still out the door. But what he said to me was, you are living a life divided and your body can only handle that for so long. And I remember him specifically saying that to me, like you're living like a double life. Your nervous system doesn't know what to do with that and how to regulate that. And you can only do that for so long. So the interesting thing for me is all of my flushing was in here, which is where I held my throat. Like I just like held my voice a lot. So I started spending time with practicing just say what you want to say. First of all, Collin, I had to learn what do I even think to begin with because I didn't even know anymore. And then start to talk. And every time I would talk, I would literally be like shaking. Now I can just like, I mean, I'm aware to not just be impulsive and to be respectful, but I also can say what I need to say. And whether I'm flushing or not, it does not matter. That voice is being used because the discomfort and the pain I was creating for myself, it's literally like my body was like begging, like just be you. And for something you said earlier, it was the best thing that ever happened to you. And I think that that spin on it is so beautiful because I can 100% say now, after the years that I have was struggling and now actually kind of see the beauty in all of this, is that it's one of the best things that ever happened to me also. Because number one, it challenged me to stop and really go inward and start spending time. And now I did do makeup, self tanner. I've talked to different professionals, acupuncture, Thai yoga, like all the stuff. I know other people have done like hypnosis, and it all led me back to myself and just you got to do the thing and you got to change your mind about how you feel about yourself when that thing happens. And it's introduced me to people like you, and it's introduced me to people from all over the world that I never would have met if we weren't having a conversation about this and empowering other people that they can still live a life and actually, in spite of this, have a life that is so wonderful and magical and still human, ups and downs, and not have to fall into these holes of I'm not good enough because I blush. And actually, if we remove the because I blush and you're left with a I'm not good enough, that's where we can spend some time and just know that the blushing is part of you and that it's going to happen, whether you want that to happen or not. I think it's in one of your TikToks. Maybe you can expand on this a little bit. You talk about how you're trying to control something that's not a control, like it's a part of being a human. I think you talk about like it's like sweating, it's like a natural response to your body. Do you remember, what TikTok I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, it's a concept that I teach to people. It's like it's just the phrase that I come back to with clients and that they seem to really like is that it's just something that happens. Like it's not good or bad. It's just like a thing. And it's like you prescribed this bad meaning to it. But it's like if everyone thought that blushing made you look weak, everyone would have this fear, but they don't. They don't have this fear of blushing because they don't think that. Like you just started telling yourself that, or somebody told you that once when you were a kid, and you thought, oh, that person said it, so therefore everybody must think that, and therefore it must be true, and therefore I shouldn't blush. And it's like, where did that come from? You know, and it just extrapolated, and then it went nuts, and now you're where you're at. And it's like that's really all that happened, and you just need to reverse that. You know, you need to start realizing that, you know, maybe it doesn't say this about me. It's just something that happens. Like when I get put on the spot, my adrenaline system or my that is a stressor that spikes my adrenaline, that spikes my heart rate, increases blood flow to certain areas of my body, which is my face, my neck, and my chest, and then that is when I blush. And it's like from there, it's like that's just what happens. And then from there, though, is that your reaction is then, oh no, I'm blushing. They're gonna think XYZ. And when you start doing this, when you start getting in your head about this, when you start freaking out, trying to control it, trying to stop it, what do you think happens when you try to control, when you try to stress out about your own stress response, right? You trigger it again, you cause it to get worse. And so like that is where your problem lies, is like my blushing will never get worse. It's like not even terrible, but like it's red there. And so it won't get worse than this because I don't go into that panic anymore. Like that is the problem solve, is like the blushing happens and then you got to stop this like switching over into a different reality in your head where you're like, oh no, they're going to blush, they're going to judge me, I'm blushing, they're going to think XYZ. I wonder if they notice. They definitely notice. I wonder if they're going to say something. What am I going to say if somebody says something? Like this is how fast these thoughts are, you know, flying through your mind in the moment while the person's still talking to you, right? And like that is the thing that causes you to go into an absolutely vicious cycle that causes you to go beat red. And so like, that is the thing. Like people think it's like a medical condition, or it's like, no, it's just like, that's just the way you were born. It's like everybody does something when they're nervous. If you start paying attention to other people, and like you said earlier, stop being so hyper fixated on yourself, like you start looking at other people and they also have nervous twitches. Like they might twitch, they might stutter, they might, you know, sweat. There's a lot of things that people do also. And so you'll realize that yours is just what you do.
I love that you just pointed that out because I've been so hyper fixated on myself before, I'm very aware of other people and almost too aware because of almost trying to see like from another perspective, like how are other people responding when I'm talking? And they are so hyper fixated on themselves in the moment. And even throughout that whole conversation, I think, like you said, I've noticed I am very aware of repetitive motions in people. So I can catch when people are just, when they're very comfortable, how they're responding in their body versus when they start talking. They absolutely have no idea they're doing it, probably unless if you've probably done some more public speaking. Well, you're great at speaking, by the way, and you spoke in your high
Thank you.
school graduation, and you do this now. Is that if you ever watch yourself back, you're like, oh, that's the thing that I do, or and you can kind of refine some of it, and and also like the use of like the filler language and all of that. But I've noticed with certain people that they do like a movement like with their shirt, they constantly like pull at their shirt, there's a thing that they do, and I don't care. I don't care at all. Or I've been talking to someone and I realize that I've started to flush, and because mine's on my chest and neck, I can see when their eyes kind of go down, like they've noticed it at that point, and then they come right back to me and we just keep talking. I know for myself, and I've shared this a lot on my channel, but I would love to hear from you, even whether from your own experience or just what you talk to some of your clients about in regards to, we make it sound so easy because honestly, it's really not that difficult. It's almost like diet and exercise. We all know the formula, but then we get in there and you hear people say like, I've tried everything. But if you could really get into those habits, you would see that you're not tracking your macros, you're snacking on stuff you're not actually tracking. There's usually the formula is pretty much the formula unless there's some sort of medical thing going on. And this is the answer. This is the answer for overcoming blushing and erythrophobia, and not so much stopping the blushing, but that's why I say overcoming erythrophobia, the fear of blushing, because it changes the mindset around whether I made progress based on whether I blushed or not. Because I traveled that journey too, where I would feel like I had so many good days. It's been 5 days since I blushed. And then all of a sudden I show up at an event and I'm flushing all throughout the whole event. My nervous system's dysregulated and I am like, shying away from everything. And now I feel like I've started back at ground zero. When I started to change my mind about, wait a minute, this does not get, do you know how much growth I've had? It's kind of like in any area of growth where we show up in a moment and we almost have a setback and we're like, okay, I had a setback, but I have grown so much in my time that that one setback isn't going to derail everything else. And sometimes too, Colin, my body is like, drink some water and go to bed. Like my nervous system's dysregulated, it's overwhelmed. It's just one of those days. And you just need to like take a shower, go to bed, and then start over again tomorrow instead of like sitting in this shame cycle of I've come so far and now I've, because I think some people do track their progress. It's similar with diet and exercise. Like, okay, I've had 4 pieces of cake that day. Now I've derailed my whole plan. No, you haven't. You have not. You just get back on track and keep going. Have you talked to your clients or had people talk with you about some of that and feeling like they're almost hyper fixated on the wrong thing with blushing instead of shifting the mindset, instead of moving into the action, they really get stuck on, but I blushed. And what are some of the things you say to your clients when they're really getting, because we spin in the blushing world on this one thing over and over again, and it's really just like, just look that way and go that way instead.
Yes. So I think what you're explaining is the value of coaching. Um, and like that right there is why I even started a coaching program. Like you can only do so much with free content. There are so many limiting beliefs inside of you that will tell you that like, you're like, yeah, it makes sense. I get it, but like, I can't do it. And it's like, why? Like, why are you telling yourself that? And it's like, you can watch all the free content in the world, but there's this one belief that's like, just holding you back, then you will stay stuck. So let me give you an example. So was um, I've always been an entrepreneur. Okay. So like I always wanted to start a business and like all through college. And I was like, oh, let me try this. Let me try this. Let me try this. I'd like create the website. I'd get the LLC set up and I'd be like, oh, I'm a business. Right. But then I wouldn't make any money. Like I wouldn't make a single dollar. It's just like an idea. It's a website. I create a little Facebook page or an Instagram page. And I'm like, yeah, I have this business, look at me. I'm so cool. Like this was like my idea back then. And extremely embarrassing now, but like, I'm proud of myself for even, I guess, somewhat trying. But I spent all this time going business after business, and there was one thing holding me back, and it was a fear of selling it. Like it was a fear of going up to someone and saying, "Hey, would you like to buy my thing?" Right? Because I was like, this is the moment of truth where I am judged. Right? Am I going to be accepted or rejected? Like, is my idea stupid? The thing that I spent so much time and effort on, is it stupid or is it something that people might actually want? And like, I never wanted to find out the truth. And so I finally recognized that was my biggest thing is I had this fear of sales. And it's like I could watch all the sales videos that I want in the world. And it didn't matter, right? Because I still had this belief inside of me that like I was afraid of this and like they're going to reject me and like whatever. But then and because of that, I went and I spent $10,000 on a sales coaching program. Like it was everything I had saved up. Like I spent several months in a corporate job before that, and I saved up a bunch of money. I'm living at home with my parents right now, and so I had all this money saved up. And I was like, this is the thing holding me back from entrepreneurship. And I just remember being like, again, I reached that point. I spent 4 or 5 years struggling to start a business. And again, I reached that one, I call it the action threshold, or I think that's what Tony Robbins refers to it as. It's like this threshold where just the pain of change becomes less than the pain of just continuously going down this route. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw my entire savings at this problem so I can just be past this. And so I got a coach. And within 6 weeks, I made my first sale. And it's like the reason why is just because I was telling myself that I was so afraid of selling. I didn't want to be salesy. But the coach that I had totally reshifted that for me, and he said that you're there to help them. Like they need your help. Like you think you can help them, and you worrying about how you look while doing it is preventing you from giving them the help that they need. And like that was enough. Just hearing that is exactly what I needed to hear. And I was like, that is the thing. And so I went on the call and I was like, I know I'm nervous, but like they need me. Like they need my help. I believe in this product. I believe in what I'm going to do for them. And then I made my first sale. And then after that, now I have this proof point that has broken my belief. I can do this. I can help. And then that is now what I can build off of in the future. I can always look back on that moment and say, I've done this before. I can do it again. And then you do it. And so the to basically answer your question, I don't want to like pitch coaching, but like that is the value, is that there's just something like I could explain a million different content or concepts. You could watch every single video on my channel, and maybe you'll find the thing that you need to hear. Very possible. Or you can get on a call and just talk to somebody and say, yeah, it's this. And you're like, oh, got it. And then boom, now you're you feel equipped for that first time.
And it's in regards to your situation. I totally agree with you on everything you just said about coaching and the limited mindset. Like for me, it was always money. Money is good or bad, good or bad, good or bad, good or bad. Some of that comes from a religious background that I was in for a while. And then one day when it hit me that money is a tool, it's not good or bad. It is a tool, and it's how it is used and the intention behind how we're using it that makes it good or bad. It's never the money though. And I realized that a lot of that was not even my own thinking. It's just what was told to me or taught to me and how I perceived money, which also limited money in my life. And then when that shifted into the whole belief system, just shifted into this is a tool. It literally is like money was knocking at the door for me and just showing up. But I wasn't hyper fixated on the money. I was hyper fixated on my goals, on things I want to do for my family, on things I want to do for other people, how this actually creates more opportunity where I can share my gifts with people instead of thinking about just like money, money, good, bad, good, bad. So I absolutely agree with you. And even with Blushing Phoenix, so many people have told me, other content creators in the space and just people in general that are like, you absolutely should start meeting with people and talking with people. So it's been a while since I did that. I've done it a couple of times and I'm just like, oh, I'm not equipped for this. I just rather make content and put it out there for people. But I launched the summer coaching. Well, first of all, I did a couple of ebooks and they sold. I did very minimal marketing on them, but people bought them and people messaged me and they were grateful for that. And it's like you said, it kind of breaks this idea that people don't want what you have. Then I opened up the summer coaching program and holy crap, Collin, it was so many like responses that I couldn't take them all because it's one-on-one and my time is filled with other things that I had to do applications and look through who I could meet with. And then just meeting with people, some of them have been through therapy or are in therapy, or they were really far on their journey. And I was like, so why did you want to meet with me? And they were like, I just want to talk to somebody who knows what I'm talking about. And even just the act of talking to somebody who's been through it and is living their life beyond it, it was healing for them because it was, first of all, they got to talk to me about their very specific situation and ask specific questions, not just, content. And I do tell them when you come through coaching with me, I tell them, I'm not being rude, but I will interrupt you multiple times because you will gloss over what I call a brain loop. And we need to go into that loop and go like break it. We got to break that loop down. And it can feel kind of mean, but we only got like an hour and we got to break that loop. So speaking of coaching and our love for coaching, talk to us about why you started Breakthrough Blushing, your coaching program, how you help people there. I know you've got your social media outlets as well. So talk to us about how that idea came to be and what you're doing now for people who struggle with erythrophobia and are looking to move on from that.
When I overcame this in high school, like I genuinely stopped thinking about it. That is the goal that you want to get to. Like the goal for the people on this channel should be to never have to come back to this channel, which kind of sucks because it's like that is the point where, like your success is never talking to them again, which is kind of a bummer. But that is the definition of success here. It's just that you don't think about it. It's not in your way. It's not something that you need to throw resources at. And so I was at that point and I did not think about blushing for like 6 years. And Then in I think it was like August of last year, August of 2023, I came across a Reddit post and it was like from the erythrophobia subreddit. And I was like, oh my gosh, there are people that are still dealing with this. Because I remember looking at that subreddit like a long, long, long time ago. And I was like, wow, there are people that are still stuck. And now being on the other side of it, it was very clear to me where they were going wrong. It was all that mindset. It was I would have I wish we could we'll have to do this another time because I want to go deeper into many more topics. But I saw them just going in this rabbit hole of finding proof on why they're helpless, why this is embarrassing, why this is so noticeable, why this is, and it's like they're going in this, they're finding, if you look for proof to prove why this is embarrassing, you will continue finding it. And so like I kept seeing that rhythm in there, and I was like, okay, these people like need some sort of pattern interrupt, right? These people need something to they need my help. It was the first time in my life I've ever like come across something and be like, wow, I can help these people. And I almost felt like obligated to do something about it. And so I spent the next 4 months, 2 to 3 hours every morning. There's a whiteboard on my wall right here. And I spent 2 to 3 months like trying to draw it out. And I was like, okay. I was like, why does this happen? I'm like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And like I just kept digging and digging and digging, ended up creating this system called that I call the Breakthrough Blushing Blueprint. And that is essentially how you solve this. And I have it on my website. You can go to breakthroughblushing.com. And I teach everything for free. Like I said, you can go through all the content in the world and you can do this on your own. You absolutely can. I did it on my own. April, did you? I mean,
Yep,
you
on
had
my
to
own.
kind of do this on your own. So like you can do this on your own. It's like not impossible. It's just that if you want to do it faster, easier, more enjoyable, it's easier to hire one of us and just have us tell you, hey, this is where you're going wrong. You're telling yourself this, and that's not true. And it's like you need to start going into this situation. You do this instead, and you think this certain thing, and trust me, you'll notice it. You'll see, wow, I can't believe I was thinking that this whole time. So anyway, I didn't think about this as a business to begin with. I really just thought of it as like, hey, this is something where I can contribute and like maybe this is something I can use in the future to like say, hey, I did this cool thing. And so I just made this video. I started making some content about this, and I realized there are a ton of people struggling. Had a couple of videos have like 1 million+ views. And so that's when I started making a coaching program to help people even further because I got tons of questions. And now that's where I'm at is I'm trying to grow the coaching program. But I still continue to go back to making free content in order to help all the people who can't afford it. Because I know a lot of people out there are like students in school that are 15, 16 years old that reach out to me and tell me they're dealing with this. And so obviously I want to still help them as well. So I put everything that I can out for free in order to try to help the most people possible.
I love your approach. And even when you and I connected, I was like, I'm very careful who I let talk to on like let talk to the community from Blushing Phoenix because I have seen some people in the space. And I think some of the pause that people have with coaches is that people have absolutely abused the coaching world to just try to make a quick buck. And I think that what I absolutely love about what you said going into that was that that is the goal of Blushing Phoenix is that people will come through here, they will extract what they need out of here, and then they will go on. And honestly, it's my own personal struggle with Blushing Phoenix sometimes is like, I want to move on. Like it's like similar to what you were saying, but I almost feel it's almost like Blushing Phoenix has me. Like it is not, I've tried to walk away from it so many different times, but I just feel like it's my duty to continue to give. And I think that's why sometimes I follow those rules of like post this many times, have this content thing. And then everything inside of me just feels like, I don't want to do that with Blushing Phoenix. Blushing Phoenix is it's my gift back. And yes, coaching, I do creativity coaching. I've written books. There's so much more to my life than blushing. And so I sometimes get in this place where I'm like, well, how do I transition Blushing Phoenix into this just April Pointer thing? But then I'm like, well, Blushing Phoenix is kind of a standalone. But then I'll create other projects. Like I have Lion's Breath Wellness that I'm just starting, where I'm like, if you follow Blushing Phoenix, but you're also wanting to see life beyond the blush, then come over to Lion's Breath Wellness, because that's where we talk about holistically my whole life, being a mom, being a corporate like executive, working in like small business owner for Blushing Phoenix and all of those different things, because there's so much more to my life than that. And I remember when I always mention my functional neurologist because I think he's fantastic and was such a huge part of my healing process in Tennessee. But I remember him saying to me one time, my whole goal is to get you so well that I lose your business. And I just feel like that's such an awesome, it's an awesome specialty to have, is to, you want people to rise up and move on and then continue to share their message with people as they go on their way. And I've seen also just your point about the Reddit threads and some of those topics. It's in the beginning when I got involved in some of the Facebook groups and some of the other groups, I just was like, oh, it is just reinforcing how awful it is. And I'm just like, I can't do this. So that's why I honestly went and started doing Blushing Phoenix, was to really have a different kind of space where it's telling you, you can do this. This
Hmm.
is that you are
Yep.
totally capable. You absolutely can do this. And one thing that I share, and I'm pretty sure this is probably how you are as a coach as well. One thing I tell people when they come through coaching is, let's just use the sport of basketball, which I don't know much about, but I know enough to say this about it, is that you're the player, I'm the coach. You're in the game already. You already know how to play this game. Let's just say you keep making the shot and it's not going in. I'm watching from a different perspective and I can see you got it. You just need to turn a little bit, or you're frazzled. You're in your head. I know you as a player, so I got to get you on the sidelines for a minute. Let's go over to the bench. Get you on the bench. I'm either going to tell you something, put you back in the game for you to do it, or I know you need to take a timeout and sit on the bench for a little bit and just kind of like calm down, get your bearings, and then you'll go back out there. And it's up to you whether you apply the direction and the feedback to sharpen up that shot so you actually hit the basket. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're the player that was recruited onto the team. You already know how to play this game. Your shot is off just a little bit, and we need to course correct that shot. And a coach is very valuable in seeing from a different perspective and offering you the tools to be able to align that shot to actually make the basket, if I used all the
Yeah.
terminology
Yeah.
correct.
I've never thought about it as like in that fashion, but I might have to start using that. But one thing that I did realize just a few days ago, and I'm actually happy you brought that up, because a different analogy that I realized that I could use to kind of help people that might be kind of weird, is essentially, when you're in like your car and there's like a fly in the car and it's like it won't get out, and like you try to lower the window and it won't leave. Well, that's kind of how like you are, and I'm talking to not you, but I'm talking to the audience. Is like you are this fly, and like all you see is this glass in front of you, and you're missing the fact that there's this giant opening for you to escape right here. But because you are so close to the glass, you can't see it. But somebody who's standing 5 feet back can be like, yeah, you just go there and you're good and you're gone, But like, because you are so close to your own situation and you're in it and you're in the thick of it, you literally cannot see. Like you are so wrapped up emotionally, and you're so wrapped up in these everyday situations that you never have a time. It's like not even possible to take a step back and see the full picture. You need somebody else to be like, yeah, here's what you're telling yourself. And that goes back to what you said earlier about like interrupting, being rude. I don't like, I sometimes worry that I come across a little like stark and a little, but like I just say what they need to hear. And it's like, I'm sorry if that like bothers you. It usually doesn't. It doesn't. But for me, I'm like, I hope that didn't bother them. And so, but point is like sometimes you just need somebody to say, yeah, that right there is what you're telling yourself that needs to stop. Like you stop doing that. That is the thing. And if you stop doing that, you start saying this instead, you will start noticing, you'll start seeing proof that supports this new belief instead of this old belief that you kept telling yourself. And then you'll start breaking down that old belief and you'll start building this new belief as you continue to see proof that builds up that new belief.
A coach is not there to make you feel good. A coach is there, what you just said about coming across like really firm and stark is, it's, I know for me personally, in any of my like life altering moments, So we get in these brain loops and we have convinced ourselves unknowingly, usually on like an unconscious level, we believe this thing. And it's just such a regular part of our dialogue that we don't think about it. A coach hears it and a coach will say, wait a minute. And like, you're like, they're like two or three sentences down the line and you're like, we got to go back to this thing because they've glossed over it. I've done that. And I've had people who I trust grab a hold of that moment. The reason why it's so jarring internally to a person is because you're literally having your brain broken. You're having a loop broken, which is usually where the hangup is. And it's such a beautiful moment. So even though it doesn't feel good in the moment, it's actually a good sign. It means that something has now, I call it sandpapering, where you leave and you're like, I don't think I liked him. He was kind of rude, or I don't like her. That was kind of rude. But if you're mature and you sit with that sandpaper rub, you'll start to see the window. And I love your analogy because that really is what it is too. And for people to feel who are listening to this, to really feel encouraged that a lot of times you're right there. You just haven't
So
made the
close.
turn to go out the window. You're right there. It's not that the window is
Yes.
nowhere to be found. It's literally right there. You just can't see it. Collin, what would you want to share with people as we're closing out? Anything that we forgot to talk about that you wanted to share? I've still got a little bit of time if you do, so you're good to share anything else that you'd like. And then what I do like to close out with, once you get to that point, is just the encouragement that you would share with anybody who's listening to this.
So if I had to say one thing, I think our beliefs shape reality, and beliefs are simply claims that we accept as facts because we have evidence to support them. And so it's like you saying I can't is because you have evidence to say that you can't. But you can just as easily say that I can and then start noticing evidence that you can. And so like just be careful of the things you're telling yourself, the things you're reinforcing to yourself. Stop telling yourself that this is so embarrassing, this is so noticeable, this needs to be covered up. They're not going to like me. That somebody's going to say something. It's like this is just how I am. This is just how I am. And then you start from there and you start saying, well, now what? And then it's like, okay, expect to blush and then focus on what you can control from there. Because the more you just obsess over this, the worse it's going to get. But it all starts with the claims you're telling yourself about it. Start realizing I can still be confident while blushing if I just maintain strong body language and I raise my hand first instead of trying to avoid getting called on. It's like if you act that way, people will see you that way. And you start realizing, hey, I can be confident. I can be a good public speaker. Like I want people to understand, like me right now, speaking like this. I appreciate you saying I'm a good public speaker. I mean, I try to improve it. But like I was not always comfortable speaking like this. Like you have to understand that I was the kid that tried to avoid speaking. And then when I would speak, my voice would be super shaky. And it's like you just have to start going into situations and just putting yourself or stepping out of your comfort zone and just building your confidence in your ability to do that. And it starts with the beliefs that you have. You have to start telling yourself, I can do this. Or what if? And it starts there, and then it opens your mind from being, this is such a problem, this is so embarrassing, I'm a victim, I'm so helpless, to how can I get out of this? And what can I do? And how can I start looking at this differently? And maybe I'm making this a bigger deal than it really is. And then you start noticing things in the real world that support this new belief. Your old belief starts to break down, and then that is how you start getting out of this.
The confidence that you're exuding, the confidence that I'm exuding, this came from continuously showing up. And I think that you made a good point in sharing that you weren't always a great speaker and it's something you're continuing to work on. If Sometimes I love going through people's social media where they have like amazing aesthetic and they're doing great content, and like scroll as far down as I can to see where they came from, because it's
Mm.
encouraging to know that they were out there doing the thing. They were putting themselves out there, whether they had it figured out or it was pretty or whatever. And then they get better as time goes on. My first YouTube video here, I did not know how to talk to a camera at all. It was like horrible. My first few videos are so cringy. And then I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to do thumbnails. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. It's just continuously showing up and just figuring it out. And then you kind of realize, and I will tell you from working with multiple executives and founders in my career, none of us know what we're doing. Like we are learning but we every day are facing challenges where we have no idea what we're doing, but we get to go figure it out by showing up and just trying and then iterating on what we're doing. One thing that I love, I listen to Marissa Peer a lot. She is like a rapid transformational therapist. She's all over YouTube and such. But one of the things she says in regards to like the victimized mindset and you're telling yourself a lie. And she's like, if you're going to tell yourself a lie, tell yourself a better lie. So if you
Mm,
feel like I'm confident and I can do these things and I can show up in friend groups and have great relationships and speak and do all of these things and you feel like that's a lie, well, you being a victim and you're not being worthy and all that's a lie. So just tell yourself a better lie. If you're going to
mm,
choose one, pick a good one and choose the better lie. So,
agreed.
Collin, what was your website again where people can find your information?
Breakthroughblushing.com, or you can just visit my social medias, Breakthrough Blushing. You'll find me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify.
Awesome. And we will also have all of Colin's information in the description box below. And if you're listening on the podcast, be sure to go visit his website. I'll have that also on Buzzsprout where you guys can find him there as well. Collin, thank you so much for your time today. We definitely got to do this again because we can go into like a whole new layer of like coaching
Oh, yes.
conversations and like all kinds of stuff that I think could be helpful for people as they're listening.
Oh yes. Oh, 100%. And like I want to dive into anxiety more. There's so many misconceptions around anxiety in my opinion, and how it should be dealt with. And so I would love to dive into that as well in a future conversation.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I can't wait to have you back on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, April.